"You don't belong here." The words cracked through the marble lobby like a whip. Every head in the bank turned. A man in a pale blue shirt and loosened tie leaned over the counter, fingers stabbing the air toward the only black man standing at the desk. His voice wasn't low. It wasn't discreet. It was designed to humiliate. The target of his rage stood steady. A plain white t-shirt, dark jeans, no watch, no jewelry. His phone pressed against his ear, his brow carved in quiet restraint. He didn't shout back. He didn't even blink. The room froze in the pause that followed. Behind the teller glass, a blonde manager folded her arms and smirked, like the insult was an inside joke she already believed. A young woman in line lifted her phone, thumb hovering over record. A cluster of clients at the back whispered, some disgusted, some intrigued, all trapped in the spectacle. And there he stood, Marcus Reed. No entourage, no designer suit, just presence, just calm. The man in the blue shirt snarled louder. "This lounge is for real clients. You think you can walk in here with that look and demand service?" Spit caught the edge of his words. His face was flushed red, veins pushing at the side of his temple. Marcus adjusted the phone closer to his ear. His voice stayed low, almost too low for the room. "Stay ready," he said into the receiver. That was all. But silence carried weight, the kind of weight that makes aggressors overplay their hand. The manager leaned forward now, tone dripping disdain. "Sir, I don't know what game you're playing, but we're not here for stunts. You'll need to step out before we call security." The audience shifted. A woman clutched her purse tighter. A man in a tailored suit smirked like he was watching theater. The camera phone rose higher. The red dot blinked. Evidence had just begun. Marcus's eyes swept the lobby once, slow, unhurried. It wasn't fear. It wasn't shame. It was calculation, a man measuring seconds before a storm broke. Before we continue, where are you watching from? Drop your city or country in the comments below. And if you believe in dignity and justice, hit like and subscribe. These stories spark change, and we're glad you're here. Now, back to Marcus. The blue-shirted banker slammed his palm against the counter. "Get him out!" His voice cracked, louder than before. But the louder he grew, the smaller he looked. Marcus stayed rooted, anchored. One hand steady at his side, the other gripping his phone. His jaw tightened, but his tone remained unshaken. He had been here before, not this lobby, but this moment. At 26, his account was frozen without cause. At 30, he was called high risk, despite collateral stacked higher than policy required. Now, at 42, the pattern hadn't changed. Only his power had, and the room was about to learn the difference. Marcus Reed didn't look like money. He didn't want to. That was the point. The lobby of Fairmont Trust smelled of polished marble and corporate pride, the kind of place where appearance was currency before a single dollar ever changed hands. Men in tailored suits drifted toward glass offices. Women with designer handbags leaned against counters, voices hushed and entitled. And then there was Marcus' plain white t-shirt, worn jeans, sneakers that carried no logo. He moved differently, too. Not hurried, not hesitant, just steady. At 42, Marcus had mastered the art of invisibility. He knew what it meant to be underestimated, and he wielded it like armor. No one in that branch recognized him as the majority shareholder of the very institution they worked for. He intended it that way. This wasn't a banking errand. This was a test. He'd walked through the glass doors at 10:15 a.m., carrying nothing but a slim folder tucked under his arm and a phone pressed loosely in his hand. No entourage, no driver waiting out front. He wanted to see the unfiltered truth of how his staff treated a man who didn't fit their idea of wealth. And the truth was already spilling into the air like a cracked pipe. The teller at the counter hadn't even greeted him when he asked for access to the executive lounge. She'd stared at his shirt, his skin, his silence, then disappeared into the back. 5 minutes later, the man in the blue shirt arrived, jaw tight, finger already itching to point. Marcus stayed calm. He always did. He thought of the first time he was denied service. 26 years old, his first six-figure check in hand, frozen out because the banker assumed fraud. He thought of 30, when he was told his loan looked suspicious, despite collateral stacked higher than anyone else's. Decades later, the pattern hadn't vanished. It had only evolved. Now here he was again, in a branch with his name hidden deep in the ownership files, standing in the crosshairs of prejudice dressed up as policy. The blonde woman by the desk, the manager leaned on the counter, smiling with the kind of confidence born from ignorance. She didn't know who she was smirking at. To her, Marcus was just another nuisance to be managed, another stranger to be ushered toward the exit. Behind them, the witnesses multiplied. A young woman in a navy coat raised her phone higher, angling for proof. A gray-haired man shifted uncomfortably, murmuring to the person beside him, "This doesn't look right." Two interns in branded lanyards hovered near the back, wide-eyed, whispering. The room was becoming a stage, and Marcus stood at its center, silent, deliberate, unshaken. He didn't fidget. He didn't plead. He let the others fill the silence with accusations. That was his discipline. Speak only when it mattered. The banker in blue barked again, louder this time. "You think you can walk in here dressed like that and demand service? Who do you think you are?" Marcus didn't answer. Not yet. His phone was still at his ear, his eyes still calm, scanning the faces around him. He wasn't just a man in a t-shirt being humiliated. He was a man measuring the temperature of a room that was about to burn. And none of them, not the banker, not the smirking manager, not even the curious crowd, had the faintest clue that the fire would come from the one they thought didn't belong. The tension didn't simmer. It snapped. The manager stepped forward now, heels clicking against the marble as if each strike was a claim of territory. She rested both hands on the counter, leaned in just close enough for disdain to drip from her smile. "Sir, we'll need documentation of where those funds originated. And if you can't provide it immediately, we'll have to deny your request." Her tone wasn't a question. It was a dismissal. Marcus slid the slim folder across the desk, his movements controlled, deliberate. Inside, account statements, corporate letters, more than enough to silence doubt. He didn't flinch when she flipped it open with 2 fingers, as though touching it too long might stain her hands. She glanced at the first page, didn't even read. Her lips curled. "This doesn't look authentic." "Enfrem." A beat of silence fell heavy. The banker in the blue shirt smirked behind her shoulder. "Told you," he muttered. From the corner, a security guard shifted his stance, one hand near his radio. Not ordered yet, but waiting, ready. Marcus stayed still, his breathing even. But the smirk across the desk widened. The manager's voice rose just enough for the witnesses to catch. "We've seen these stunts before. People walk in here with flashy paperwork, claim to have assets, and vanish once the truth catches up. We're not falling for it." The young woman with the phone whispered into her mic, "They just called his documents fake." The red recording light blinked, steady and unforgiving. The crowd thickened. An older client, sharp suit, silver hair, shook his head. "This isn't how you treat someone." His voice was low, but it carried. The manager ignored him. She lifted the folder higher, then dropped it onto the counter with a sharp slap of paper against wood. The sound echoed like a verdict. "Escort him out," she ordered. Not to security yet, but to her staff, the junior teller and the man in blue. Both looked uneasy. Both obeyed. The banker jabbed a finger toward the lobby doors. "Sir, let's not make this harder than it has to be." Marcus didn't move, didn't speak. His stillness rattled them more than shouting ever could. The junior teller hesitated, glancing between the manager and Marcus. His voice faltered. "Maybe we should—" "Don't argue," the manager snapped. "Call security." The words landed like stones. The guard's hand lifted the radio, thumb pressing against the button. Across the lobby, a murmur rose sharp, incredulous. The woman recording whispered louder now. "They're calling security on him for paperwork." A middle-aged father, clutching his child's hand, muttered, "Ridiculous." Another client tilted her head, frowning, as though watching a play she didn't buy into. But the staff pressed on. The banker leaned closer, sneering. "We can't waste time with walk-ins pretending to be wealthy. This is a bank, not a shelter." Gasps rippled. Even the guard's thumb hesitated on the radio. Marcus finally spoke. His voice was low, steady, cutting through the air like glass on stone. "Run my name." The manager laughed, quick, sharp, dismissive. "You're not verified. This isn't a walk-in center." And with that, the stage was set. A man calm as bedrock. A staff determined to erase him. A room full of witnesses caught between disbelief and dawning outrage. The storm was no longer brewing. It was here. The command had been given. Security was on its way. The banker in blue crossed his arms, satisfied, as if eviction was already guaranteed. The manager tapped her nails against the counter like a gavel striking wood, sealing her judgment before any verdict was real. But Marcus didn't rise, didn't retreat. He sat back slightly, hands folded on the counter, eyes fixed not on them but through them like glass, like they were already fading from relevance. His silence wasn't passive. It was strategy. Every second he refused to react, the room grew more unsettled. The guard lowered his radio halfway. "Ma'am, he hasn't done anything." His tone wasn't defiance, but doubt had crept in. The manager cut her eyes toward him, sharp enough to warn. "Do your job." Across the lobby, the young woman with the phone whispered to herself, "He hasn't even raised his voice." She angled her camera closer. The red light caught Marcus's profile jaw firm, gaze unwavering, breath measured. To anyone else, it looked like surrender. To Marcus, it was the opposite, containment. Inside his mind, the memory returned, sharp as broken glass. He was 27, standing at another counter, another branch, another manager deciding he wasn't credible. That day, he had argued. That day, he had demanded fairness, and all it earned him was a frozen account and humiliation that clung for months. Never again. Now, at 42, he knew the power of restraint. He let the accusers fill the silence with their noise. The louder they grew, the weaker their authority sounded. The banker leaned closer, voice dripping with condescension. "Sir, people like you waste our time. Why don't you head down the street? Pawn shops are open all day." A hush dropped like a curtain. Even the murmuring clients stiffened at the venom in his tone. A gray-haired woman near the chairs gasped, clutching her purse tighter. Marcus blinked once, slow, unmoved. His phone still rested near his ear. Into the receiver, his voice was soft, almost inaudible. "Stand by. Protocol 7. Waiting." Oh. The words were a whisper, but they cut like thunder to anyone close enough to hear. The manager scoffed, mistaking calm for weakness. "You're not fooling anyone. You're a fraud. Security will handle you in minutes." Marcus's lips twitched, not a smile, not anger, something steadier. "Facts," he said quietly, "not noise." The young woman recording whispered again, "He's calm, too calm." Her video feed trembled, not from fear but from anticipation. The father with the child muttered, "Man's not even fighting back." His voice carried a hint of respect, maybe recognition. The banker slammed his palm on the desk again. "Did you hear me? Out. Now." Marcus didn't move. And in that stillness, the weight of control shifted barely noticeable, like the first tilt of a scale. The accusers thought silence was submission. They didn't realize it was preparation. The storm hadn't broken yet, but when it did, no one in that lobby would forget who had held their ground with nothing but calm. The lobby was no longer a quiet place of transactions. It was an audience chamber. Every tick of the clock above the teller's window felt louder, like the room itself was waiting for a verdict. The young woman with the phone steadied her grip, angling the camera higher. Her whisper carried into the mic, "They're trying to throw him out for no reason." The red light blinked. Evidence was alive. A junior employee near the back lanyard dangling, no more than 25, shifted uncomfortably. His hands fumbled with a stack of forms. He had watched the entire exchange, every insult sharpened against the man in the white t-shirt. His lips parted, but he said nothing. Not yet. Fear weighed heavier than conscience. On the leather chairs by the window, a silver-haired woman turned to her husband. "This isn't right." He nodded, muttering, "You can see it plain as day. He hasn't done a thing." A father in a gray suit tugged his son closer, shaking his head. "Watch," he told the boy softly. "This is how people abuse authority." The child didn't understand, but he felt the tension. The banker in blue sneered louder, feeding on the silence. "Recording won't change the fact he doesn't belong here." He gestured toward the young woman filming, his voice carrying across the marble. "Delete it before we call the cops on you, too." She froze, but her thumb never left the screen. Her voice, shaking but clear, answered, "No, people need to see this." The manager's smirk thinned into a line. She turned, eyes slicing through the room. "Everyone here, understand, this man is not a client. He's attempting fraud. Security has been called." But the crowd wasn't convinced. The whispers grew louder, echoing against the high ceilings. "Fraud! He gave them papers." He hasn't shouted once. Look at him calm, not desperate. "Emsen," a young intern finally stepped forward. His voice cracked, but he found strength mid-sentence. I saw his name earlier, on the schedule. He has an appointment here." The banker snapped, "Stay out of this." His face flushed, his authority rattled. The intern shrank, but the words had already landed. Doubt spread like smoke. The guard, still holding the radio, hesitated again. His gaze flicked to Marcus, then back to the manager. He hadn't pressed the button. Not yet. Marcus remained still. His eyes met the woman's lens, then shifted back to the counter. He didn't need to ask for help. Witnesses were speaking on their own, and that was more powerful than any outburst. The red recording light caught the manager's glare, the banker's sneer, the guard's hesitation. It caught Marcus, unmoved, a man anchoring chaos with silence. What began as humiliation had become theater, and the audience wasn't siding with the actors in suits. The lobby air thickened. No one moved, but the tension pulsed like static before a storm. The manager straightened, her smirk hardening into something colder. She raised her voice just enough to cut through the whispers. "This is wasting everyone's time, sir. You are not a verified client. Your paperwork is suspicious." And frankly, she let her eyes drag deliberately over Marcus's plain shirt, his jeans, his skin. "You don't look like someone who belongs in this branch." Gasps rippled. The junior intern lowered his eyes, ashamed but silent. The young woman with the phone whispered into her mic, "She just said it out loud." The banker in blue leaned on the counter, emboldened by her words. "You think you can pull 5 figures out dressed like that? Please, you're either a con or a joke. Either way, you're leaving." Marcus didn't move, his breathing steady, his gaze fixed. He had seen this script before. Only the faces changed. The guard shifted uneasily. "Ma'am, maybe we should—" "Enough!" The manager's voice cracked, sharp as glass. "Security protocol is in motion. He will be escorted out." She looked directly at Marcus now, eyes narrowed into daggers. "And if you think raising your voice or flashing some cheap document will change that, you're mistaken." Still, Marcus didn't raise his voice. He leaned slightly forward, calm as stone. "Facts don't fear volume." The banker scoffed, slapping the folder on the desk, pages scattered like leaves in wind. This is garbage. Probably printed at home. You really think we're that naive?" The papers fluttered across the marble floor. A collective gasp followed. Clients near the window stood, visibly uncomfortable. A woman clutched her purse tighter. A man whispered, "This isn't protocol. This is prejudice." The young intern spoke again, firmer this time. "I saw his name. This morning. In the system." The manager's glare cut him down. "One more word and you're done here." But the words had already been heard. They lingered. The father with the child raised his voice now, loud enough to echo. "You can't treat people like this. Not here. Not in front of everyone." The manager spun toward him, lips curling. "If you're dissatisfied, sir, you're free to take your accounts elsewhere." The crowd buzzed. What had begun as isolated humiliation was unraveling into a public reckoning. Marcus sat back slightly, folding his hands again. His voice was low, unshaken. "Every word you speak now is being recorded." The manager's smirk faltered for a fraction of a second. The young woman with the phone whispered into her mic, "He's right. I've got it all." And in that moment, the scale tipped further. What the staff thought was, control had become exposure. Every insult, every dismissal, every scattered page was no longer confined to the marble lobby. It was evidence, and evidence had a way of outlasting arrogance. The sound of paper still echoed faintly across the lobby when the manager made her move. She reached over the counter, snatched the folder Marcus had placed so carefully, and with one sharp motion tore the front page clean in half. The rip sliced through the silence like a scream. Gasps erupted. The silver-haired woman near the chairs clutched her chest. The father pulled his son closer. Even the guard blinked, stunned by the audacity. "This," the manager spat, holding the torn sheet aloft as if it were evidence, "is worthless, just like your claim. Security," she barked at the guard. "Escort him out now." The banker in blue grinned, stepping forward with renewed arrogance. "You heard her. Time to go, before this becomes a police matter." He leaned close, voice dripping with malice. "You don't want to find out how quickly they'll put cuffs on you." The word cuffs cracked the air. Murmurs swelled in the crowd. The young woman with the phone whispered furiously into her mic. "They just threatened him with arrest." Marcus remained seated. His hands rested lightly on the counter as if anchoring him to the marble itself. His eyes locked on the manager's, calm and unblinking. The guard hesitated, radio in hand. His thumb hovered over the button. "Ma'am, he hasn't—" "Call it in," the manager snapped, her voice rising with every syllable. "Unverified client. Suspicious documents. Possible fraud. We will not tolerate deception in this branch." The banker laughed, the sound harsh and hollow. "Better hurry. Before he bolts." The junior intern stepped forward, courage breaking through fear. "This isn't right. He hasn't done anything wrong. He has an appointment." "Quiet!" the manager roared. "Or you'll be out with him." The intern froze, shame burning across his face. But the words were out, and the room had heard them. The father in the gray suit raised his voice over the chaos. "I'm a client here. If you put your hands on him, I'll close every account I own." The room buzzed hotter, louder. Clients whispering, some filming, some simply staring with open disbelief. The manager slammed her fist on the counter, face flushed, voice cracking like glass under pressure. "This is not a debate. He is trespassing. He is a fraud. And I will not let this branch be humiliated by a con artist in a t-shirt." That final phrase hung heavy. The prejudice wasn't coded anymore. It was naked, unfiltered, undeniable. Marcus finally moved. Not with anger, with precision. He picked up his phone, raised it slowly to his ear, and spoke in a voice low but firm, each word deliberate. "Proceed to escalation. Protocol 7. Effective immediately." The room went still. The banker frowned, confused. The manager scoffed, mistaking composure for bluff. But the witnesses knew. The woman with the phone whispered, almost reverent, "Something's about to happen." And she was right. The storm had finally broken. The torn paper still fluttered to the marble floor when Marcus lifted his phone higher. His voice, calm but cutting, carried across the lobby. "Activate escalation. Protocol 7. Full sweep." He didn't shout. He didn't need to. The words were deliberate, weighted, and unmistakably confident. On the other end, a crisp female voice answered instantly. "Understood, Mr. Reed. Logging incident. Branch surveillance is now live streaming to corporate. Compliance board notified." The manager froze mid-smirk. Her eyes flicked toward the cameras in the ceiling, then back to Marcus. "Who do you think you're talking to?" Marcus didn't answer her. He didn't even look her way. He kept his eyes on the phone, tone even, steady. "Record all staff names. Capture every statement verbatim. Begin access audit for this branch. M." The banker in blue scoffed, trying to mask his sudden unease with louder bravado. "Don't play games. Nobody's listening to you." The assistant's voice, clear through the speaker, echoed across the lobby. Branch manager identified Claire Jennings, prior complaints logged. Reopening all closed bias claims now. Gasps rippled. The young woman recording whispered to her mic, "He's not bluffing. He's pulling files in real time." "Who?" Claire Jennings, the manager, stepped back, color draining from her face. That's confidential information. You can't." Marcus lowered the phone slightly, his gaze finally meeting hers. "Confidential to me? Interesting argument." The crowd buzzed, disbelief tipping toward recognition. The guard, still holding his radio, lowered it fully now. His voice dropped, unsure. "Sir, who are you?" Marcus didn't answer him yet. Timing mattered. Instead, he spoke once more into the phone. "Freeze internal messaging for this branch. Isolate logins. Any attempt to delete records should trigger termination flags." "Confirmed," his assistant replied. "Systems locked." The banker's phone buzzed in his pocket. He pulled it out instinctively, and his face paled. Access denied. He tapped again, harder. Same message. The young intern's eyes widened. "Their systems, they're shutting down." Clients murmured, shifting in their seats. Some leaned forward, phones raised, capturing every second. Marcus set his phone on the counter, speaker still live. His hands folded calmly beside it. His voice carried the weight of finality. "You wanted security? You wanted exposure? You'll have both." The manager tried one last surge of control. "This is harassment. He's not a client, he's a fraud pretending—" The assistant's voice cut her off through the speaker, sharp as a gavel. "Correction. Verified executive account holder. Appointment confirmed for 10:30 a.m. Identity matched. Owner-level clearance." The room erupted gasps, murmurs, disbelief snapping into recognition. The woman with the phone whispered, "Oh my God, he's their boss." But Marcus remained still. His calm wasn't surrender. It was power measured in silence. And now the silence was ending. The marble lobby felt smaller now. as if the walls themselves leaned closer to hear what was coming. Phones were up everywhere, a constellation of red recording dots aimed at one man in a plain white t-shirt. Marcus rose slowly from his chair. He didn't rush. He didn't need to. The weight of every eye in the room followed him upward. He picked up his phone from the counter, ended the call with a single tap, then set it down again, this time face up, screen still glowing with system locks in progress. For the first time, he let his voice carry. Not loud, just enough to cut through the lobby like a blade through paper. "My name," he said, steady, deliberate, "is Marcus Reed, CEO of Reed Enterprises, majority shareholder of Fairmont Trust." The words dropped like a stone into water. Silence rippled outward, broken only by the faint buzz of the banker's locked phone. The manager blinked, her lips parting soundlessly. That's impossible." Marcus's gaze didn't waver. Impossible? Or inconvenient? The banker in blue stumbled back a step, his bravado collapsing with each syllable. You're lying. You're dressed like—" He stopped himself, but the prejudice hung naked in the air. Marcus tilted his head, calm as ever. "Like what?" His tone was soft, but the challenge in it froze the banker where he stood. The silver-haired woman by the chairs whispered to no one in particular, "He owns the bank." The young woman with the phone gasped into her mic. "He just said it. He's the CEO." The father in the gray suit let out a low whistle. "Explains the calm." The manager scrambled for footing. Even if that's true, this doesn't excuse." "It explains everything," Marcus interrupted, his voice sharp, final. "It explains why your system's just locked. It explains why compliance is reviewing every word you've spoken. And it explains," he leaned closer now, his eyes locking hers, "why you've just made the worst mistake of your career." The banker tried to recover, stammering. We were just following policy." "Policy?" Marcus asked, each syllable precise. "Show me where policy says to tear client documents. Show me where policy says to call a man a fraud because of a t-shirt." The lobby erupted with murmurs. Some clients nodded. Others whispered angrily. A few even applauded, sharp claps cracking the tension. The young intern stepped forward again, courage steady this time. "I saw his name. He was in the system." He told the truth. Marcus's gaze softened slightly toward the intern, then sharpened back at the staff who had humiliated him. "The difference," he said evenly, "is that some people see truth. Others bury it under arrogance." The manager's face flushed crimson. The banker's arms dropped uselessly at his sides. Even the guard looked away, ashamed to have nearly followed their lead. Marcus let the silence linger, his presence now undeniable, unshakable. And then, with the room hanging on his next words, he said it. "You called me a fraud in a bank I own." The sentence landed like a hammer. Phones trembled in hands. Gasps turned into shouts, and the balance of power in the lobby shifted forever. The words still hung in the air. "You called me a fraud in a bank I own." And their echo seemed louder than the marble lobby itself. The manager's face drained of color. She opened her mouth to speak, but no sound came out. For the first time, the smirk she wore like armor cracked, leaving nothing but panic beneath. The banker in blue staggered backward until his hip struck the counter. His phone buzzed again. He pulled it out with shaking hands. Access revoked. He tried once more. Same message. His jaw dropped, chest rising fast with shallow breaths. The guard set his radio down slowly, as if it had turned into something toxic. His shoulders sagged, eyes flicking between Marcus and the crumbling staff. He wasn't confused anymore. He was ashamed. The young intern's hands trembled, but his eyes glowed with vindication. He had risked speaking the truth, and now the truth towered in front of him like a monument. Clients whispered openly now, no longer hushed. I knew something was wrong. They called him a fraud? In his own bank? "I'm moving my accounts out of here. Today." The silver-haired woman who had gasped earlier clapped once, sharp and deliberate. Others followed a ripple of applause that cut sharper than any accusation. Phones tilted higher, recording every second of the downfall. Claire Jennings, the manager, tried to salvage control. There must be some mistake. We didn't know." Marcus raised a hand and she froze. His calm sliced her sentence in half. "You didn't need to know. Respect isn't reserved for names on your system. It's owed to every human who walks through those doors." Her knees nearly buckled under the weight of it. The banker in blue muttered to himself, I didn't mean—" His words collapsed before they reached the air. Marcus's silence pressed harder than any rebuttal. He didn't argue. He didn't shout. He let their own panic convict them. The father in the gray suit turned to his son, voice steady but fierce. Remember this. Power doesn't scream. It doesn't shove. It doesn't tear paper to prove itself. Power waits. Then it speaks once. The boy nodded, wide-eyed, the lesson etching itself into memory. Meanwhile, the crowd shifted, forming an invisible line client stepping closer to Marcus, away from the disgraced staff. A circle of witnesses, not ordered but instinctive, surrounding him with their presence. The young woman filming whispered breathlessly, "They're crumbling, all of them," and crumble they did. Authority once brandished like a weapon now lay scattered, stripped by the revelation of truth. The same counter they had used to humiliate him had become their stage of disgrace. Marcus stood at its center, steady, immovable, while around him, the very people who had tried to erase him collapsed into the weight of exposure. The branch had turned inside out, and justice was just beginning. The applause faded into murmurs, but the weight of expectation pressed against the marble walls. Everyone in the lobby, staff, clients, strangers, holding phones aloft, waited for Marcus's next move. He didn't pace. He didn't shout. He simply picked up his phone from the counter, tapped once, and spoke with the same measured clarity he had held since walking through the doors. "Carla," he said, his voice carrying across the speaker, "initiate removals, effective immediately." And a crisp female voice answered at once, "Confirmed. Please specify targets." Marcus didn't glance at the banker or the manager. He didn't need to. Claire Jennings, branch manager. Michael Turner, senior teller. He paused. His eyes swept over the guard, then settled on him. Security staff exempt. You hesitated. You questioned. That matters. The guard's shoulders lifted, relief mingled with shame. The assistant's voice came back, firm. Processing terminations. Credentials locked. Accounts frozen. The banker in blue, Michael, yanked his phone from his pocket again, desperate. The screen flashed red. Accesses denied. He tried the computer at the counter, pounding the keys. Locked. Every attempt died on the glass screen. His face drained as the finality hit him. The manager gripped the edge of the desk like a drowning woman. You can't just..." Marcus's gaze sliced her words in half. "I don't just. I decide." Carla's voice through the phone was cold as steel. "System confirms termination complete. Jennings and Turner no longer have active contracts with Fairmont Trust." The crowd gasped, then erupted. Some laughed, some clapped, some simply stared at the former gatekeepers stripped of power in seconds. The young intern, still trembling, whispered, "They're really gone. Just like that." Marcus turned slightly toward him, voice steady. "Justice doesn't need theatrics. It needs proof, and proof speaks for itself." The silver-haired woman clapped again, sharper this time. "About time," she said aloud. Others echoed her. Claire's hands shook as she reached for her badge. It blinked red, a cruel confirmation of her erasure. She slammed it on the counter, her voice breaking. "You'll regret this." Marcus's expression didn't change. "The only regret here is how long I allowed you to represent my institution." Her face crumpled. Michael sank into a chair, head in his hands. The lobby was no longer theirs. It belonged to Marcus, to the witnesses, to justice unfolding in real time. And in the silence that followed, every client in the room understood. Arrogance had been fired. Prejudice had been dismissed. Fairmont Trust had a new face in its lobby, the one it had tried, and failed, to erase. The marble lobby stood still, hushed as though even the air feared to move. Two disgraced staff sat collapsed behind the counter badges, dark, futures erased. Around them, a half-circle of witnesses remained with phones raised, not out of pity but out of reverence. They had just seen something few ever do. Prejudice met with power, arrogance silenced by truth. Marcus didn't look at the cameras. He didn't need validation. He looked at the people, the intern who had risked speaking, the guard who had hesitated, the father teaching his son, the woman who refused to stop recording. His gaze lingered, calm and deliberate, as though stamping the lesson into the walls themselves. Then he spoke, his tone low but resonant, a voice that carried without force. "I didn't come here today for a spectacle. I came here for service the same as any of you." He paused, letting the truth sink in. "And instead, I was called a fraud, not because of paperwork, not because of protocol, but because of what they chose to see. The words hit heavier than any accusation. Clients shifted, some nodding, some whispering, but all listening. Marcus continued, his cadence deliberate, each sentence an anchor. You thought silence meant submission. You thought calm meant weakness. That was your last mistake. The manager, trembling, dared a final protest. You didn't have to ruin us. Huh. Marcus turned, his eyes like stone. You ruined yourselves the moment you believed dignity was optional. The crowd erupted in applause. Phones trembled as they captured the moment, comments already flooding live streams. He gathered his folder, the same documents they had dismissed, now sacred evidence of their downfall, and slid them neatly under his arm. He lifted his phone once more, pressing a final command. Carla, log this incident as precedent. Mandatory training for all branches. Zero tolerance going forward. Confirmed, came the reply. Marcus turned back to the crowd. His final words weren't for the staff. They were for everyone watching, in the lobby and beyond. I don't need to record videos to prove my worth. I am the result at the end of them. Remember this. Justice doesn't shout. It executes. And with that, he walked out of the lobby. No guards escorting him, no apologies trailing behind. Just silence, thick and unshakable, broken only by the steady rhythm of his footstep. Behind him, the branch had been remade, arrogance dismantled, truth recorded, dignity restored. For every client still standing, one fact was undeniable. Marcus Reed hadn't just walked into a bank that morning. He had changed it forever.